Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the CA Media Podcast, a show that allows you to come in your own unique way. I'm your host, Clyde Anderson, and today I have Angie on as we dive in and talk about navigating grief. The show is brought to you by Visionary Minds Public Relations and Media. If you have any media consultations or inquiries, please contact Tammy Reese at visionarymindsny@gmail.com, and she would gladly get in contact with you. So today I have Angie on. Angie, welcome to the CA Media Podcast.
Thank
How
you.
how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
Would you like to tell the audience, the listeners, a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, my name is Angie, and I'm from Brooklyn, and I sing with James Holbush and Praise. I'm an alto. I also go to the Citadel of Praise and Worship, the Citadel Cathedral of Praise and Worship, and my bishop is Dr. Kevin Bond. And I'm a church girl. And I do Well, my job, my career right now is I'm a case manager. I work for DHS. Yeah, that's what I work for, DHS. And I work with homeless migrants and I basically help people. That's what I do. And when you asked me about this podcast, the first thing I said I wanted to do was talk about my grief journey because I know that it can help somebody. And here we are.
Thank you, first and foremost, for joining the podcast and giving us a little bit in depth about yourself. It's an honor. I believe that this podcast or this episode will help somebody. Someone will be touched by this conversation that we're about to partake in.
Okay.
Um, so, would you like to share to us why this conversation is so important?
Well, I'm gonna tell you this. So it took me a long time to get to where I am now, and because grief is a process, right? And I've always known that, but to go through it is different than to know it, right?
Right.
It's just like if you're becoming a nurse, you could know all, or a doctor, you could know all of the technical terms and all of the facets of being a doctor or being a nurse, but to actually do the practical work, you know, it is totally different. And that is just how grief is. Grief, knowing what grief is and knowing that it is a process, that's one thing. But to go through it is another. So,
So, Angie, would you like, we all experience grief. I'm 36 years young,
mhm,
and I had several grieving process. There was a time where I was told that I couldn't be emotional
yeah.
during a particular grief because it doesn't. You just got to be strong for X, Y, Z. There was
Uh-huh.
times I was very emotional to where I was jumping in or attempt to jump into a casket.
Mhm.
There was times where you
Me too.
know information that was shared
Mhm.
surprisingly to a family and which shocked everybody. Like, why would you write this? Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, so let's talk about your journey. Can you share like a personal experience of grief that you dealt with?
Yeah, so a lot of people have died in my lifetime, right? I am 48, I'll be 49, right? However, when my father died, that was like a turning point in my life. And then right after my father died, my mom passed away. And um that was like a big thing in my life because for some strange reason, I thought my father passing away, I never thought it would happen. I didn't think my parents were gonna die, period. And that's dumb, you know. But that is a childlike mentality, right? And because I am the youngest in my family, um, you know, I had still have kind of sort of a childlike mentality. And when things happen to you in your life when you're younger, you know, the trauma of things happening to you when you are younger, it shapes your thinking, right? And um I just never thought my parents would die. I never thought about it. I never thought about them because my parents, like, some people are around sick people all the time, right? So
Right.
they know, oh, well, this person is dying, that person is dying, right? And that didn't happen to me. And my parents were not sick growing up, and they were not in and out of the hospital, things of that sort. Like, I did not experience that. Now, my grandparents, yes, my grandparents were sick. I had aunts and uncles that were sick, but it wasn't as close to me as my parents. Because I lived in the house with my parents until they died, you know, and um that's what makes the experience a little different for me, I'm gonna say. And I just, I'm glad I went through it. I could say that now. But while I was going through, and I mean, I'm still going through it, but I'm kind of at a, I'm at a high right now because grief comes in waves, and I'm at a high that I hope I stay on. And you know, with my father passing away, it was like really difficult because I didn't know he was passing away. Right? I thought my father was sick, and I thought he was coming out of the hospital. In my family, I am not the one to tell news to, because I'm very dramatic. And I'll be like, I'll be doing the heavy breathing, and then I start crying. I'm the one that's gonna pass out and faint, or look like I'm passing out and fainting because loss is just, it's not good for me. Like, I don't like losing friends, even though I have lost some, I have kicked some away. But like the death of a parent that you lived with your whole life and you helped take care of, that was like difficult for me. And because of the relationship me and my dad had, it was even more difficult because I was the daddy's girl. And I mean, we would argue, we would fuss and stuff, but when my dad told me, when you argue with people, you care. You care about what they say, you care about what they think. And there's some people I will not argue with. I'll be like, oh, okay. And I go on. But
Right.
with my dad, oh my goodness. Me and my father was like this. And when he died, I was just like, what? I was like, what happened? And like when he was dying, so my father had this thing called Agent Orange, right? My father was in the Vietnam War. And my father told me that when he was in the Vietnam War, they was like spraying a chemical over the camps. I don't know what you call them, but it was like wherever the black soldiers were, they were spraying a chemical, right? Because if you look up that war at the time, they were telling black people, go fight, go fight, go fight. This was in the 60s and the 70s, I think. And they didn't really like us. They didn't want to give us nothing. Then when those black men came back from that war, they didn't have no jobs, they didn't have nowhere to live, and a lot of them were hooked on drugs and stuff like that. But that didn't happen to my father. Thank you, Jesus.
Praise God.
So,
Yes.
you know, um, they sprayed this chemical over my dad and his camp, and he said they would make a sound like they would get on the unbelievable. They would get on the like the horn, the bullhorn, right?
Hmm.
Loudspeaker. They would get on the loudspeaker, and they would say, um, they're spraying. And my father said he would cover from his head to like his waist, right? So, long story short, when my father died, his legs were what the chemical absorbed. And like we couldn't put shoes on his feet. And he had like white diabetic socks on in that casket. And I hated it because we couldn't put shoes on him and because his body was swollen down there. And
Mm.
That was from the chemical, you know. And the thing that he had, it was Agent Orange, and it was a slow degenerative disease. And the one, like, people have had it, but the one that my dad had was very rare because only him and another man had it. And before my father died, that man passed away as well.
Oh wow.
And they did the VA hospital, they did a, how you call it, a study on my dad. They paid him, and they did a study on my dad, and to find out what Agent Orange is so that it can be treated, right? And because what happened to my dad was, he because he had Agent Orange, it brought on other things. Like, he was diabetic, he had a slight heart attack, he had a slight stroke, everything was slight. And he got blind. And because my father wasn't always blind, when I was growing up, my father could see. When I got in college, like when I was in 12th grade, first year of college, freshman in college, my father was getting blind. And we didn't understand what was happening. I was like, well, who's spilling juice behind the microwave? And it was my dad, and he didn't know. Like, he knew something was happening, but my father wasn't verbal, and my father, he wasn't verbal about things that was getting on his nerves, let me say that, with his health. And you know that thing, like, black men don't go to the doctor. That's how my father was. My mother had to make my father go to the doctor when she realized something was going on, and then
Right.
I told him, I said, what happened was, my father went to work one day. How he got blind, my father went to work one day, and he said he was feeling okay, but it was allergy season, and he was rubbing his
Right.
eye. And
Yes.
he said that he bent over at 42nd Street Grand Central to tie his shoe. And when he lifted back up, he was blind. He couldn't see. So something had ruptured back there. And then he was like that for a couple of days, and he never said anything to us. But and he was walking around, and my mother asked him, like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he was
Mhm.
like, "No, I just got a headache." He would say stuff like that, but he couldn't see.
Right. So like as I see that your father's you know decline in health and then eventually which led to his blindness
Yeah.
and other issues which
Yeah.
then thus led to the transition is like one of the hardest part of your journey for you. So
Yeah.
like what the grief affected like different areas of your life, like your work life, your relationship, your mental health.
So, yeah, so when my father died, I had a job. I was working at Morgan Stanley Smith Barney. And that's when the banks were bad. And I was like, well, my father's still in the hospital. And I would go to work from 7 to 4. And then I would come home, I would take a nap, and I would wake up at 11 o'clock at night, take a shower, get dressed for work, and then go to the hospital and sit with my father all night. Right. And I would go to the hospital and I would wash him up. And because they were treating him like bad in the hospital. And my father was an independent person. So when I saw that he wasn't doing the things he needed to do for himself, I would ask him stuff like, "Daddy, are you okay?" And he would tell me I'm fine. And I asked him, I said, "Daddy, are you in pain?" He would tell me no. And then the day that I got laid off from my job, the day I got laid off from my job was a Thursday. I'll never forget it. And I didn't want to go to the hospital because I had to tell my father I didn't have a job, and that wasn't good. To me, it wasn't good because he prided himself on us, having working. And my aunt Jean was there, and my mother was there, and my sister had just went home. My father told my sister, he said, "Go home and take care of Bozo." That was her boy. That's the name he would give our boyfriends. He never knew anybody's name. Everybody was Bozo. So he told my sister, he said, "Go home and take care of Bozo." right? So my sister went home. She went to North Carolina. That's where she lives. And then my aunt and my mother was at the hospital all day. And they kept telling me, Angie, when you coming to the hospital? And I said, I'll be there. I'll be there. I didn't go Thursday night. And then that Friday morning, my father died. I went. No, I didn't go that Thursday, but that Thursday night when I went to the hospital, it was like early in the morning. Like it was like three something in the morning. I kept procrastinating. Like something is happening, and I felt it. And I had called my sister and I asked. I said, Nisha, I said, is Daddy dying? And she told me, yeah. She was like, Angie. And I was like, well, why nobody didn't tell me? And she was like, well, we can't tell you stuff like that. You are not living in reality. You look through life with rose-colored glasses. Like you think everything is gonna be okay, and it's not. And I was like, and it's nothing they could do, it's nothing that they could do. And then she was like, no, Angie. She was like, just go to the hospital. And I said, okay. So I went and I was procrastinating. I got in my car and I went and got gas. I went to McDonald's. I was doing all these stops. And when I got to the hospital, I looked at my father and I was like, what happened to him? I had dropped the stuff. It was like a movie. I dropped the stuff. I was like, what happened to him? And my aunt and my mother was like, well, he got on traveling shoes. And that's what people from down south say. They say, that's how they say that somebody is dying, right? And I was like, Daddy. And they told me that all day my father wasn't talking, he wasn't saying nothing. He was breathing, but he was not alert, right? He was in that stage where we call it under. He was under all day. And then when I got there, I was like, Daddy, what happened? And he was like, hey, Miss Ann. He was like, I'm okay. And I was like, what? I was like, well, Daddy, I was like, I love you. I love you. And he was like, I love you too. And then he started praying. He was like, I had a good life. And he said, I had a good wife and I got good children. And he said, I'm a blessed man. And he said, everything's going to be okay. He said, I'm going to see my maker. And then I was like, where are you going? Where are you going? And I was like, wait, Daddy, wait, wait, wait. And like, cause he was talking and his eyes kept like closing. And he said, I'm a blessed man. And then he closed his eyes and he opened them back up. He said, and I had a good life. He closed his eyes and he opened them back up. He was like, and I'm going to see my maker. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I love you. I love you. I love you, Daddy. I love you. And I was like talking over him. And then I put my head on his chest, and my father died, child. And I was like, wait a minute. I said, what is happening? What is happening? What is happening? And then I was like losing it in the hospital. But you have to think about it. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And he like died. He died at 4:07.
Mm.
And that was it. The ride home was crazy. And I had called my pastor and my pastor came to my house. My friend Kendra came. When my friend Kendra got to my house, it was like I lost it. I lost it. I lost it because I was just like, he died. He died. I couldn't believe it. And I feel like because my mind was still like, I can't believe he died. I think that's what I was holding on to, right? Like he's not dead. He's not dead. And I bought my father new undergarments. I bought him new socks. And I said, yeah, he could use this stuff when he comes home. And I bought all this stuff, deodorant, powder, washcloths, all this new stuff for him. And he wasn't there to use it. And it broke my heart. So then
So how did so like what helped you like overcome like the process and navigating that grief of the loss of
it
your
did
dad?
nothing helped. Nothing helped at that time. Because right after my father died, my mother died a year and a half later. And my mother, it was the same thing. She did that same thing. And like on my mother's side of the family, like they died real slow, you know. And like she was under, but my sister was there with me, with my mother. And that helped a lot because it was like I hated it. I hated going to the hospital. I hated it. I hated being there, and my mother was not what I was remembering. And what my mother did, she's so funny because my mother knew she was dying and she told me. And I'm glad she told me because that helped me understand what was going on. And even though she told me, I still had a little kid's mind. And when I mean little kid, I mean like I was acting like I was 5, with my sister. And my sister understood because out of the two of us, she is the mature one, and I am not the mature one.
So
And
your sister was like uh your main source of strength to help
basically,
you process the grief and
yeah,
to also help you guide you to understand
yes,
that this is regular
right,
for humans to deal with.
right.
So so knowing that, did your perspective of grief change over
No,
time, and why not?
no, because I still was holding on to my parents. They were gone, you know, and then with me, I was like, I do fear God, right? And I was like, God, like you ain't have to do me like this. Like why you took both of them? You could have just took one, and then years later, you could have took another one. But you was like, "Hi, he's going and she's going in a couple of days, so get with it." And I did. I asked God. I asked God, "Why did you take my parents the way that you took them? The way that you took them? Why?" And I waited because they teach us when you praying to God, wait for an answer. And my answer was, I had to grow up. That's number one. And the second answer was, I am going to help somebody when their people go, you know? And um, have I helped anybody yet? I don't know.
So
But
which brings us to our next question. Like, what would you say to someone currently uh struggling grief? How would you approach them?
I would tell them, feel their feelings. Don't be strong for nobody. Don't hold anything in, like, because that's what I did. I held my grief in for about a good 10 years and then it would come out, right? Like I would have these episodes where I would be crying for hours and that made me sick, like literally like sick. I was vomiting, and I would get nosebleeds, and half of that stuff that I went through it by myself. I didn't tell nobody that that's what was happening to me because I knew if I told my pastor that, my pastor would have came to my house and shook my liver loose, like get out of this, And then I know if I would have told my sister that, she would have been worried. So I just held a lot of stuff in. I held everything in, and then I held it in for so long that I was doing weird stuff, And what's weird, I was like I was holding food. I just threw it away though. I just recently threw the food away because I was like, well, I know if every time I went out to eat, I would bring my parents something back. And I was like, well, you know what? They'll eat this later. And I will put it in the refrigerator for them. And I had like food in my refrigerator that was spoiled for years, since 2012 and 2013.
Wow.
Yeah. I did that. And I was like the washcloths they used and their toothbrushes that they use, I wasn't throwing them away. I wasn't throwing away clothing. I wasn't anything that belonged to my parents. I was trying to hold on to it because I'm thinking I'm holding on to them. And I'm not, that's not going to bring them back. So what happened was I went to therapy, but this was 10 years later. I went to therapy. I just went to therapy in 2024 for the first time, August of 2024. I went to therapy because the job that I had good insurance, and I said I'm going to go to therapy because I need help. I would go to church, and I would just sit in church and cry for hours. I would sit in church and cry. And like nobody would really say anything to me. Like my pastor would be like, okay. And he'll pat me on the, Bishop loves you. Give me a kiss on the forehead, and he go about his business because it's nothing that you can do. It's nothing that a person can say or do that's going to stop my tears, that's going to make me feel better because I feel like I lost. I feel like I lost. And it's I wouldn't wish the feeling on anybody. That feeling that I had, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But today, what helped me was the therapy. And I suggest anybody that loses anybody or anything, go to therapy so you can get your thoughts together.
Amen.
Because therapy helped me. And all I was doing, this lady didn't do anything special. She just let me talk out what I was feeling without interrupting me, and she was I went to therapy today. I go to her every Monday, and she lets me talk it out. But what I will say is when I started therapy, I was in a dark place. And even though I would show up for myself, like I went to work, I went to church, and I put my mask on, you know, like, well, don't go in there looking sad because they're gonna think something's wrong. So smile. But there were days that it was just like I would go to work crying, or I would
Right.
leave work crying, go to church crying, or if a praise came through, I'd be like, oh, good. Now I could cry, you know?
Correct.
And it was like my cousins would be like, they would say stuff to me like, cousin, are you okay? And they knew, but it was nothing that they can do to help me. I had to help myself. And because I know I felt like I was like in a hole, a dark hole, and I
Right.
was just looking up, watching everybody else run their lives, and I was like stuck. I was like stuck in a place. And um therapy helped me get out. And anybody that lost anything, a dog, a fish, anything, you lose it, go to therapy.
Amen.
Because
Yeah,
therapy will help you
figure it out.
it'll help you because it's like a ball of yarn. It'll help you get that yarn out.
Um, amen.
Untie yarn,
So I got one final question in
hmm
reference to, grieving, and then we could talk about, the rapid fire questions and give
Okay.
closing thoughts. What misconceptions about grief do you think people have?
That you can control it, you can't control grief. And another misconception is that, you know, um, everybody, like, there's a way to grieve. There is no way to grieve. Everybody grieves differently. And I mean, if it's 1.5 billion people in the world, then there's 1.5 billion ways to grieve, you know? And some things may seem similar, but it's never the same. It's never the same way.
Amen.
And I think that um, therapy helps people come out of that dark place, you know? Because I mean, don't get me wrong, like I was praying to God, because I had my own inhibitions about therapy,
Correct. We all do.
because
I
I was
think
like,
every human being does.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
and I was like, I'm not crazy, but low key, I was a little, not crazy is such a bad word because it's not that you're crazy. Your mind is wrapped around this person or these
Right.
people still being here, and you have to
Exactly.
unwrap your mind from that. They are not here, and they wouldn't even want you to live the way you're living. Like like I was living with dead people, and that's not how I'm supposed to live.
No,
So
you're not. So I encourage listeners, people that listen to the TA Media podcast, to seek the support that you may need in
mhm.
reference to grieving, mental health, any issue that you may be going through. It's Google. Use Google search and search whatever you're going through. For religious people or non-religious people, good. Read the Bible. You can seek. outside counseling, whatever
Hmm.
power that you may believe.
Or
Um,
at your
and, and
job.
and and yeah, most jobs has
Like,
EAP, which is
right.
Employee Assistance Program, in
Hmm.
which they can support you in whatever areas that you may need help with.
Hmm.
And grieving has its own process. There's no time in
Yes.
grieving.
There's
So
no time in grieving.
so Angie, would you like to share a final word or a resource that you would like to recommend to the listeners of the CE Media podcast?
Well, I mean, I go to this place called Destin Horizons, and this they that's who I go to therapy. That's the place that I go to therapy at, and it's via Zoom, and I would recommend that place. Destin Horizons. Google it.
To
If
Destin
you have
Horizon.
if you have insurance, they take it because they take my insurance. So Google it. I also say don't stop praying, you know. This year was the first year I felt lighter, you
Got rid
know.
of, in the words of Joey Gunn, you got rid of that heavy load.
Yes, you know, and all I did was talk to somebody, you know, and maybe that's what I needed. Not saying that, people wasn't trying to help me because they were, but because I was so guarded, you know, I spoke to somebody that didn't know me, and I recommend that too. Talk to
Yeah.
somebody that does not really know, that does not know you at all, so that you can get out what you need to get out. Keep a journal. That's what I did too. And I have more than one. Like I have a prayer journal, and then I have my journal I write in after I do therapy. You know, and if you do decide to go the therapy route, take it seriously because it's gonna help. Those are my nuggets.
Thank you, Angie, for your nuggets, your words of wisdom. Guests, audience, listeners, viewers, if you would like to share your journey of grief, you can email the podcast at cavpodcast@gmail.com. You can leave questions, comments, concerns on the YouTube page, CA Media Podcast, or on Spotify. You can leave questions on there if you desire. Um, Angie, this section of the podcast allows you to give me your first answer that comes to your mind. So we call this the rapid fire
Okay.
section of this podcast. Uh,
Okay.
I'm gonna put a timer on. Can you still see me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put a timer on for 1 minute
Okay.
and or two. Actually, I'll put two. And
Okay.
you give me the first answer that comes to your mind. All right. You
Okay.
ready?
Okay.
All right. Here we go. What's
Okay.
your favorite artist? Who's your favorite artist?
R&B or gospel?
Either or.
My favorite artist is James Hall Worship and Praise. Ain't no doubt about it. And the
I was
Citadel and Sean Tillery and Changed and Stefan and his choir.
okay.
Those are my favorites.
What's your
Okay.
favorite food that you like to eat?
I like to eat seafood. I like shrimp.
What's your favorite place that you travel to?
Well, I like Chicago.
Okay. Favorite restaurant in Brooklyn?
I don't have a favorite restaurant in Brooklyn, but my favorite restaurant in New York is called Carmine's. Carmine's.
Okay. What's your favorite hairstyle that you like to wear?
I,
Your style.
a ponytail and a bang.
Your favorite gospel song of all time,
My favorite
outside of James Hall.
Manifest. I think Jonathan Nelson sings that. Manifest is my favorite. That's the first song on my morning ride, and I love that song, Manifest.
What would you call your style that you like to wear?
Uh, I don't know what it's called. I mean, I'm Church Girl Chic. I don't know.
Okay. Uh, what's your favorite vehicle that you've driven?
I don't have a favorite car. I just want something with a wheel and four wheels on the bottom and the wheel in the inside. Anything that can drive it. Listen, get me where I gotta go. I don't need bells and whistles, but I do like a lot of lights and stuff. You know, like how in the car you could you could touch like all this stuff inside.
Yes.
I want to touch the lights. Oh, you got lights in the car. I like that. See, that's what I'm talking about. My mind, childlike. Go
Got
ahead.
you. Nah, that's the time. It's 2 minutes.
Okay.
Rapid fire question with Angie. Angie, would you like to leave the listeners, the viewers, your social media?
I'm on social media. Everything is Muffin Love. I think Instagram is Muffin Love 34. I think it's Muffin Love 34. But you'll see my face there. And then my Facebook is Angie Muffin WAP. Angie, my name, Muffin, my nickname, Worship and Praise, WAP. So Angie Muffin WAP, all three together. That's my Facebook. And that's it. I don't have any other things. I don't have the others.
Okay. Angie, it's a pleasure to have you on the See Me a podcast. The show that
Uh-huh.
allows you to come in your own unique way.
Uh-huh.
For listeners, those who would like to join the podcast and or uh, leave a question, comments, concerns, you can email the podcast at cmediapodcast at gmail.com. You can catch the podcast on X, Threads, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, Twitter, at CA Media Podcast. You can use the trending hashtag CA Media Pod if you would like to leave a comment. But thank you, Angie, again for joining the CA Media Podcast, the show that allows you to come your own unique way.
You welcome.
I am your host, Clyde Anderson, and I will catch y'all on the flip side. I take care.
Okay, bye.